What we want to do is buy low and sell high. Human nature causes us to buy high and sell low. At minimum, we want to avoid it. And at maximum, we want to do the opposite. Now, it's not easy because what you have to do is you have to restrain your enthusiasm as things are positive, and you have to turn more positive as things are negative. It's very hard to do. Investing is a fascinating area, but it should be done on the basis of a strong understanding. Many people invest before they have the understanding. It's time, not timing, that produces success. Just put your money in and let time pass.
자, 삼프로TV 시청자 여러분, 그리고 경제의 신과 함께로 들으시는 팟캐스트 청취자 여러분, 그리고 전국에서 또 지구촌 곳곳에서 이 시간 기다려주시는 우리 투자자 여러분, 오랜만에 제가 글로벌머니 토크에 마이크를 잡게 되었습니다. 사실 저는 하고 싶었는데요. 우리 강남규 선임기자님하고 우리 2%가 허용을 안 해줘서 오늘에서야 여러분 뵙게 되었습니다. 오늘 특별한 순서라고 여러분 아마도 상상을 하실 것 같은데, 저 개인적으로는 정말 삼프로TV 잘 했구나라는 생각이 들 정도로 굉장한 시간입니다. 여러분 너무 오버한다고요? 정말이라니까요. 예, 이분도요, 저도 뭐 여러분 아시는 것처럼 제 백그라운드의 대부분이 채권 투자를 했습니다마는 아마 미국 투자자 중에 그쪽 시장을 연 분이라고 평가해도 되는 분이죠. 한국 돈으로 요즘 뭐 워낙 약해서 그런 면도 있겠습니다만 한 250조 정도의 AUM을 갖고 있는 오크트리캐피털의 하워드 막스 회장을 오늘 여러분 저희 삼프로TV 특설 스튜디오에 모시게 됐습니다. 아마도 굉장히 중요한 말씀을 많이 해주실 거라고 생각이 들고, 특별히 주식 투자자 여러분들께도 사실 굉장히 많이 알려져 있는 게 우리가 모두 존경하는 오마이현인이죠. 워런 버핏께서도 이분이 정기적으로 보내주시는 이메일 메모는 처음으로 열어본다는 그런 칭찬을 할 정도로 인사이트가 있는 분이시죠. 자, 오늘 여러분께 소개하기 전에, 소개 안 하면 혼나죠. 중앙일보의 강남규 스님 기자 오셨습니다. 어서 오세요.
안녕하세요.
스님 기자라며요.
스님. 면벽수도 하시듯이 벽을 쳐다보고 기사만 쓰는.
자, 그럼 여러분 많이 기다리셨던 오크트리캐피털의 하워드 막스 회장님을 소개하겠습니다. 어서 오십시오.
Thank you. Well, I'm very glad to be here and contribute what knowledge I have.
그럼 본격적인 인터뷰 이제 시작하죠.
회장님, 최근에 그 투자 레터를 읽어보고 사실 그 계량경제학을 공부한 저에게 굉장히 그 충격적인 말들이 많았습니다. 경기 예측, 그 다음에 계량경제학인 방법론에 대한 비판으로 가득한 레터를 쓰셨던데 배경이 좀 궁금합니다, 회장님.
This is quite a dilemma. What is investing? Investing is positioning capital to benefit from future events. And yet, I insist that we can't know the future. How can we invest? And what the important conclusion from that is that you must not assume that you know what the future holds. If you admit that you don't know what the future holds, then you will invest carefully. You won't bet too heavily on one outcome. You'll spread your risk, diversify, hedge, and have a mixture of investments. The great American humorist Mark Twain said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for certain that just ain't true." And I think this is very important for your viewers to consider. No sentence that begins with, "I don't know, but," or "I may be wrong, but," ever got anybody into trouble. You get into trouble when you say, "I'm sure that this will happen. I'm certain that that will happen." Because if you are too confident and you bet too much on one outcome and you're wrong, then you can fail. If you admit uncertainty and balance your bets over a number of scenarios, it's highly likely that you will succeed. People rely on forecasts because they do not like to live with uncertainty. There's a quote in the memo: if people didn't have forecasts, something like, if people didn't have forecasts to rely on, they couldn't get out of bed in the morning. It's terrifying to know that you have to live in a world that is unpredictable. But it is, in my opinion. And you have two choices, in my opinion. You can say, the world is unpredictable and we're going to accommodate to that, or we're going to live by predictions. One of my friends, the day the memo came out, one of my friends said to me, yes, but you have to take a position, don't you? My answer is, you don't have to take a position. If there is an event and you have no reason to believe you know what the outcome is going to be, then you shouldn't bet on that event, or you should hedge that event. When Oaktree makes its investments, we merely assume that we don't know what's going to happen in the economy or in the markets, and we take actions which allow for that uncertainty. We all have opinions. I rail against forecasting, but I have opinions. I just don't bet heavily on my opinions. It's one thing to have an opinion. It's something very different to be confident that you're right. And I'm never confident that I'm right. Where we believe we can be right, where we can get an edge and produce superior performance, we hope, is in what I call the micro, not the macro. Macro, for the benefit of your viewers, is countries, economies, currencies, commodities, interest rates, and markets. And really, nobody knows those things better than anybody else. The micro, companies, industries, securities, these are things that through hard work and skill, I think you can get an advantage and do a superior job. So that's where we put our emphasis. But if that is where we're experts, then we shouldn't be betting on economies and interest rates and currencies.
회장님, 1969년 이후로 약 50년 동안 금융과 투자 투자 세계에서 활동을 하셨습니다. 그동안 그 50년을 어떤 시기적으로 구분하신다라면 아마도 이제 조금 철학과 기법, 전략 이런 게 이제 진화를 했겠죠. 그걸 구분하신다라면 어떻게 구분하시고, 그 다음에 그렇다라면 현재는 어떤 상태, 어떤 단계라고 하실 수 있을까요?
Well, as you indicate, when you say 50 years, it sounds very daunting. It's a long time. It didn't feel like 50 years. But yes, I have lived through a variety of periods, cycles, maybe divided by crises. You know, things are down, up, down, crisis, up, crisis, you know. And I have, my career has been punctuated by 4 crises, 1991, 0102, 0809, global financial crisis, and of course the pandemic. And so for every strategy, for every investment approach, there are times that produce a lot of opportunity, and there are times that are what the farmer would call fallow, slow periods. And you have to know the difference. And you have to wait patiently until the opportunities come along, and then you have to move aggressively to take advantage of the opportunities. And once you do so, and they make you money, and the markets recover, then you should step back again and become patient once again. It's wrong to think that there are always great opportunities. Sometimes there are not. And I believe that the availability of opportunities depends on the market. And it depends, most importantly, on the behavior of other investors. We've gone through a long period from the middle of 2009, the end of the global financial crisis, to early 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. We were in a period where the central banks provided easy money, interest rates were low, financing was easily available to anybody who wanted to get money. People were eager to provide the money. Buyers were enthusiastic. Sellers were complacent. They were not eager to sell. Risk aversion was low. Fear was low. The greatest fear for many of those years was what we call FOMO, fear of missing out. When the market is in this condition, nobody's selling eagerly. Why should prices be low? They shouldn't be. There are no bargains in that climate. That is a time for caution. And you must recognize what's going on. I wrote a memo to my clients in February 2007 called The Race to the Bottom. And it talked about what happens when people have too much money and they're too eager to invest. The opportunities deteriorate. You have to understand the conditions that you're in. And then, usually, they take on too much risk. The structures that they build are too risky. Something happens. Some trigger event, and it collapses. Now, everybody's terrified, and nobody's eager to buy. Everybody wants to get out. Fear of losing money replaces fear of missing out. And this is the time when bargains are readily available, but you need the courage. You have to understand what's going on, and you have to have the courage to take advantage of those bargains. And so if you accept that the market fluctuates in this way, cycles we call them, then clearly it's not wise to behave the same all the time. You have to vary your behavior commensurate with what's going on in the cycle. The goal is to be counter-cyclical. Normally what happens is when things are going well, economic reports are good, companies are reporting good profits, stock prices and security prices are rising. People feel good, they buy. And the higher they go, the more they buy. Then they reach a maximum for some reason. Maybe there's a negative event, or maybe the economy just turns down and the economy is deteriorating and company reports are not as good and stock prices are falling, and now people get depressed and they sell. And the lower the prices go, the more eagerly they sell. This is wrong. What we want to do is buy low and sell high. Human nature causes us to buy high and sell low. So that is what I call pro-cyclical behavior. At minimum, we want to avoid it. And at maximum, we want to do the opposite. Now, it's not easy, because what you have to do is you have to restrain your enthusiasm as things are positive, and you have to turn more positive as things are negative. Very hard to do. Some professionals can do it, not too many amateurs can do it. But at minimum, you want to not be emotional and not succumb to the cycle. So rather than buy high and sell low, maybe you say, I'm just going to hold throughout, you see. So that's obviously better than being pro-cyclical. Of course, the best thing in the world is to be counter-cyclical at the right times, but it's not easy. And people should not try with the money they need. But anyway, my career has basically consisted of these cycles, and this is why I wrote a book on mastering the cycle, which I'm proud to say is available in Korean. Not that I'm trying to sell books, but investing is a fascinating area, and it's a potentially profitable area, and I recommend it highly, but it should be done on the basis of a strong understanding, and not too many. Many people invest before they have the understanding, and it's not like going to a casino. It's not a game of chance. Mm-hmm. It is a serious pursuit that should be followed on the basis of knowledge. Mm-hmm. In which case, you can count on having a good outcome if you do it wisely. The other thing I want to say about the periods of my life is I came into the investing business, as you indicate, 1969. And we all know, that the young people will tell you, that was a dumb world. Nobody knew much. Most people didn't understand how the market works, what makes for an attractive stock or bond. Most people did not have access to information. If you wanted to study a company, you had to send them a letter and ask for the annual report. And then they had to send it back in the mail. It took a long time. And it was easy to get a knowledge advantage just through a little effort. Warren Buffett talks about buying dollars for 50 cents. That's a good thing to do, but it relies on other people who don't understand that those are 50-cent dollars. Fast forward to today. Now everybody has a computer. Everybody's hooked up to the internet. There's lots of data feeds. Everybody understands how the market works. Now the world is a smarter place. And knowledge is cumulative. Everybody knows everything today. So my son pointed out in one of my memos called Something of Value, January of 21, that readily available quantitative information about the present will not be the source of superior profits because everybody has it. In order to have superior profits, you have to have some advantage. You have to know something that the other people don't know or do a better job of interpreting it. And so it is competitive and challenging. So what we say in the terminology of our profession is that the markets have become more efficient. The markets now have more information and do a better job of incorporating it. So I would say that it has gotten more challenging over my lifetime. When I started, I joined the industry in '69. I started managing money in '78. I started with high yield bonds. Most people didn't know about them. Most people didn't understand them. Most people were afraid of them. So it was possible for me to get a bargain. Today, all that has changed. Now everybody knows about them and nobody's afraid of them. So why should they be as cheap as they used to be? And the answer is they shouldn't. The market has become more efficient. So I noticed that you have copies of my first book here called The Most Important Thing. And there are 20 chapters, and each one says the most important thing is, and then it's a different thing. Because in investing, there's no one important thing. There are many, and balancing all the considerations is one of the things that makes it challenging. But chapter number 2 says the most important thing is understanding market efficiency. You have to understand the concept that I just explained, and the change in efficiency has been a big marker in my career.
그래서 뭐 한국에서도 그 하워드를 그 역발상의 투자대가다 뭐 이런 평가를 하죠. 시장과 반대되는 어떤 포지션을 취하는 전략으로 큰 성공을 거둔 걸로 이제 알려져 계신데 한 7개월 됐나요? 우리 그 강남규 기자가 그 하워드 인터뷰하신 게
그렇죠. 한 7개월 정도
7개월 전쯤에 한 인터뷰를 제가 그때도 보고 이 인터뷰 준비하면서 이제 뵀는데 그때도 마켓이 한 10% 코렉션 했을 때인데 그 하워드께서 무슨 말씀하셨냐면 이거 건강한 조정이니까 시장 떠날 필요 없다. 그렇게 얘기를 해주셨어요. 그런데 지금 사실은 그때보다는 좀 더 심각한 상황이 됐고 일부 기술주들, 플랫폼 기업들 이런 것들은 그때보다 뭐 한 30에서 50%는 더 빠진 주식들이 굉장히 많아졌단 말이죠. 그래서 하워드는 지금 어떻게 이 시장에 대해서 보고 계시는지, 그러면 시장이 더 심각해졌으니까 지금은 적극적으로 주식을 사야 될 때라고 생각하시지는 않는지 한번 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
The only thing I know for sure is it's a better time than a year ago or 2 years ago. The market was very high. Surprisingly, after the pandemic, the market was very high because the central banks of the world came in so strong with the rescue that they made the economy stronger and they made the liquidity very available. And that produced asset prices that were very high. And in the last year, prices have been coming down. And as you say, I said, a healthy correction, not over necessarily. There's no reason to think that this is the bottom. Prices were very high. Now they're moderate. They're not terribly low. These are not bargains we're talking about. These are reasonable prices. Nobody can say whether it's going to go lower. It may well. Your question, part of your question is this the chance of a lifetime? No, it's not the chance of a lifetime. It's a reasonably priced market. Now, I believe that most investors should be invested most of the time. The idea of being able to get in and get out and get in and get out, what we call market timing, is not a good idea for most investors. It's very hard to do. You have to understand the market, you have to understand the economy, you have to study your psychology, and you have to operate against your psychology. You have to buy when things are really bad and sell when things are really good. This is hard for most people. So I don't think that the average viewer should try market timing. They should invest either all the time or almost all the time. Now, it would be great to try to reduce your risk when the market is really high. Hard to do. Maybe worth trying, but that's about it. And market timing, most of the time, is too hard to try. Now, when I was working on my book about the cycle, I said to my son, who is a very important sounding board for me, I said, you know, I think my market calls have been correct over my career. And you know what he said to me? That's because you did it 5 times in 50 years. This is a very important concept. And, you know, he looks at all these questions with fresh eyes and makes great observations. 5 times in my life, the market was here or here. And on those occasions, the error was obvious, the argument was compelling, the chance of being right was very high. Here or here. What about here or here or here or here? In between, it's not so obvious. And the chance of being wrong is quite substantial. That's why people should not try this on a regular basis. And we don't try on a regular basis. We don't change from month to month or year to year, only in the extremes. And you know, and we're professionals and we think we understand the process, and yet we don't try that often to time the markets. And think about it this way. Let's say I told you that the market is 10% overvalued. Let's say I'm correct. what's the probability that it's going to go down over the next year versus up? My guess would be 55 to 60%. It's very common for the market to be overvalued and go up further. And in fact, if the market went down every time it was 10% overvalued, it would never get to 20% overvalued or 30% overvalued or 40%. And we've seen those gains. And we would never have bubbles, which we do from time to time. So clearly, overpriced and going down tomorrow are not synonymous. And so I think for most people, market timing is not the solution. For most people, the answer is understand investing, figure out a rational way to do it, whether it's picking good companies or going into funds or hiring a manager or something like that. Don't expect too much, you know. I go to people, I say, I think we can make you 8% a year. I think we can make you 12% a year. With our riskier products, I say maybe I think we can make you 20% a year. Then the next guy comes in, he says, we'll triple your money. He gets the money. But of course, his activities are not founded on a solid foundation. We're not going to produce miracles. If you can compound your money at 10% a year, it's a great accomplishment. And most people should not expect to do that or do better than that. The S&P 500, the main stock index in the United States, has risen at about 10.5% since 1920. Now, since 1920, we've had 17 recessions, the Great Depression, several wars, including a world war. Now we've had a pandemic, many geopolitical problems, many economic problems. We've still compounded at 10.5% a year. And if you put $1 in the S&P in 1920 and you held it strongly, you never bought, you never sold, you know what you'd have today? 8,000. That's the magic of compound growth without interruption. So for most people, the answer is put your money in, understand what you're doing so that you can be steady, don't mess it up. And I think that there's a great American investor named Bill Miller who has one of the greatest records. And he said, I quote him as saying, it's time, not timing, that produces success. Just put your money in and let time pass.
그래서 뭐 이 마켓 타이밍이라는 게 그렇게 어려워서 지금 말씀해 주셨지만 타이밍을 사지 말고 시간을 사라고 늘 말씀해 주시고 계시는데, 그러면 지금 같은 상황에서 하워드가 이 자산의 배분, asset allocation이라는 측면에서 좀 집중적으로 보고 계시는 자산 혹은 포트폴리오가 있으면 좀 소개해 주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Well, if you're going to ignore my advice and not just hold steady and try to move money around to improve, then I think that we have to be aware that the period immediately ahead is more likely to be a worse than average period rather than a better than average period. There are a lot of uncertainties, and in particular, of course, most countries have high inflation today. The central banks are trying to rein in the economies, cool off the economies in order to control inflation, which means that they're raising interest rates and withdrawing money from the system. And historically, these actions have, for the most part, produced recessions. If you can do it without producing a recession, we call that a soft landing. Most of the time, the soft landing is not achieved. So we're looking at a period ahead where business will not be as easy as it used to be. We were in an easy money environment with low interest rates, and now we're in a tighter environment because the Fed has to cool off the economy, which means that it'll be more difficult for companies, and economic growth will be weaker. That's the goal. Just remember, the goal of the central bank right now is to slow the rate of growth, because it is from an overheated economy, a too strong economy, that we get inflation. You can't have inflation control in a raging economy. You put all this together, and you must say that the next year or two will be challenging. We're predominantly what's called credit investors. We invest in debt. Debt, bonds, loans, are a promised stream of payment, a contract. A company sells you a bond. What that means is you give them money, and they sign a contract that they will pay you such and such interest every 6 months, and at the end of X years, you get your money back. This is a dependable contract as long as the company is creditworthy, and we think that this is a very good asset class in this environment. A year ago, high-yield bonds, which is one of our main products, produced roughly 4% interest every year. Now it's 9%. That makes it very attractive. And when you combine a high level of promised return with the contractual nature of the return, it sounds pretty good to me. In the long run, stocks which do not have the benefit of a contract participate in the growth of the economy and are expected to do better than bonds in the long run. But for the period immediately ahead, credit, I think, is a good tool. And if we run into tough times, your credit, or we call it fixed income investments, will probably do better than your stocks in a tough environment. But I want to add one more thing, and I want to demonstrate how complicated this area is. I never talk about this to make it seem easy. I don't want to make it seem easy. We know that the economic outlook is worse than it was in the recent past. We also know that the market is down. So the question is the market down appropriately given the worse environment, or too much, or too little? And, we suspect that there are challenges ahead for the economy. But what if I told you the recession will probably take 5% off of GDP, but the market is priced as if it's going to decline, GDP is going to decline 15%. That is to say, stocks are too cheap. So most people think positive event, prices up. Negative event, prices down. But it's not just events and prices. There's something in between, which I've been alluding to, psychology. It's not just what the events are, but how people feel about those events that produce the change in price. So if the events are negative, but the psychology is too negative, one can argue that the prices will go up. Now, I'm not making that argument. I'm only showing how much vagueness there is in this process of assessing future direction. Having said that, I admit that the future year or two will be challenging. I don't think it's going to be so bad that people should get out today in the expectation that they'll avoid a big loss and get in lower later. But it's certainly possible that the markets can decline from here. But no sure thing.
그래서 제가 이제 하워드하고 이제 인터뷰가 어레인지 된 다음에 옥트리에서는 뭘 샀는가를 제가 한번 봤거든요. 에너지 기업들을 많이 갖고 계신 걸 봤단 말이에요. 이게 상대적으로 퍼포먼스가 좋죠. 그죠?
we have a lot of portfolios. We have strategies to do many different things. Each portfolio holds many things. We do not bet so heavily on something that we commit the whole portfolio to it. Having said that, yes, we have holdings in energy, and not disproportionate. I don't make these investments. I don't make any investments anymore. I provide leadership and general direction, and my colleagues make the individual investing decisions. Having said that, I think it's fair to say that in the last year, energy investments produced the best results. And we made a lot of money in energy. Our goal as investors is always the same, which is to buy the things that provide the best bargain in terms of the ratio of the possible reward to the risk involved. So we're always trying to make investments which produce what I call is an asymmetry. You have a high probability of making money and a low probability of losing money. Now, at Oaktree, we go further. We say, if something has a big chance of loss, but a huge chance of gain, we generally don't do that because we don't like to make investments where we could have big losses. What we try to find is things with a good upside, which is disproportionate to a downside risk, which exists but is modest. And that's what we found in energy. And why? Why were we able to get good deals in energy securities? Why did we make these investments? And the answer is that in recent years, the world developed an allergy to fossil fuel. And people who believe in social responsible investing said, you must take all the oil and gas and coal stocks and sell them. And this is called ESG, among other things. We believe very strongly in ESG. We believe in being responsible investors. We believe that the businessman has responsibilities other than just to make money. We believe in the responsibility to the planet and the people who live on it, as well as our employees and our fellow citizens. But I don't believe that the best thing we can do for the planet is sell all of our energy investments. Let's say we do. What does that accomplish for the planet? Somebody else buys them. They still exist. Nothing has changed fundamentally or ecologically. It's just a show of intention. Who buys them? People who don't care about social responsibility. So maybe they buy up these oil and gas companies and operate them in a less responsible manner. That doesn't help the planet. The point is, we're going to require oil and gas for a long time. The state of California has just made a decision that they're going to stop the sale of gasoline-powered cars 2035, which means that even in California, which is the most ecological state, we're going to be selling gasoline cars for 13 years, and those cars are going to last 20 years after that, which means we're going to need gasoline for the next 33 years. The key question is, who can produce it the cleanest? So rather than saying we're going to sell all of our energy stocks, we say we're going to buy the companies that are better performers, and we're going to buy the companies that are lesser performers and make them better if we can. And I personally think that this is a more responsible position than merely selling, which accomplishes nothing, in my opinion. So that's the way we feel about it. And so many people were negative on energy stocks that for us, they became one of the areas where you could find the best bargains. And in this way, I believe that looking for bargains and good investment returns for the clients and being a responsible investor socially came together.
사실 제 투자 아이디어하고 정확하게 같으신데요. 이제 우리는 사실 에너지 전환의 시대에 들어와 있는데 역설적이지만 그 에너지 전환이라는 과제가 우리에게 있어서 전통적인 에너지 산업의 단기적인 밸류를 높이는, 왜냐하면 누구나 다 하워드가 말씀하셨지만 그 정해진 미래에 대해서 대응하려는 그 시도를 할 거고, 그러면 오일을 많이 갖고 있는 사람들은 그 가격을 높이려는 노력을 할 거라는 생각이 있어서 저도 개인적으로 에너지 스탁이라든지 그와 관련된 투자도 하고, 또 반대편에 있는 태양광이라든지 풍력이라든지 또 수소 에너지 이런 데도 투자하고, 그걸 우리끼리는 그냥 바벨 전략이라고 이렇게 얘기를 하는데,
I think we have to be realistic and practical in making decisions for our portfolios and for the world. In recent years, prior to this one, people were saying that fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal, are bad. Don't do it. And a lot of people said, sell your oil stocks. And some people did sell. And by the way, a lot of countries said, we're not going to engage in oil and gas production. We're going to shut that down and we'll import it from other countries, like Russia. And so in this process, Europe, to be green, some countries reduced their energy production and became totally dependent on Russia. And energy dependence is one of the weapons that Russia is using against the West right now. So now people say, well, maybe we need oil and gas. Maybe it has to be produced. So I think that this idea that oil and gas are bad, you should sell stocks, you shouldn't engage in that industry, is simplistic. And the world is not simplistic. And I've been here with you now on this interview. What am I talking about? How complicated things are, how difficult things are. There are very few important decisions in life that can be made on the basis of one factor. You want to be green? Shut down your oil industry. And then people will be cold and won't be able to get to work. It's not so easy. People said arms manufacturers are bad. Shut down all the arms manufacturers. Sell the arms manufacturers. Guess what? We're at war. We've been attacked in Ukraine. Now we need arms to fight Russia. Maybe arms are not so bad. Again, a multivariate decision, not one.
회장님께서는 오랜 시간 리스크 매니지먼트에 대해서 강조를 해오셨는데요. 현재 투자자들이 피하거나 관리해야 되는 리스크 특별히 좀 있는지 궁금합니다, 회장님.
This idea of risk management is very interesting. First of all, there's risk management, which means using statistical techniques to predict the downside of a portfolio. And I don't believe in that. And I don't believe that people can show me that it has worked. Risk management, I believe that after 01, 02, it was mandated that every bank have a risk manager. And more money was spent on risk management between 02 and 08 than in the rest of history put together. And guess what? We still had a global financial crisis. So I don't think you can eliminate risk through the application of statistical tools. And then you have risk management. Every investor at Oaktree, every investment professional at Oaktree is a risk manager, which is to say that when they pick up an opportunity, in addition to figuring out how well it will go if things go well, it's their job to figure out what would happen if things go poorly. What is the risk? To assess how much the downside is, what would have to happen for us to lose money, how bad it could get, how probable it is that it'll get that bad. And then the portfolio manager's job is to understand, if we add that security to the portfolio, what does that do to the overall risk? Things like correlation and so forth. But I believe that this function is best performed by analysts and portfolio managers, not by somebody who sits over there, who is neither an analyst nor a portfolio manager, but a very good statistician. And in Oaktree's investment philosophy, there are 6 tenets. The number one is risk control. And we believe that a successful long-term record is best produced by having a long series of successful investments and no terrible ones. Not by trying to shoot to the moon, but just try for consistent success and avoidance of disasters. And of course, we're now, I've been working with my clients for, my colleagues for 36 years. I've been a manager for 44 years. And I think this is the record we've produced. We don't do as well as the big risk takers in the good times, perhaps. We do much better than they do in the bad times, and we do steady throughout. And number 2 on our list of investment philosophy is consistency. I believe risk control and consistency can be a very satisfactory foundation for long-term investment success, and that's what we try to produce.
사실 그 인터뷰가 거의 막바지로 가고 있는데 제가 하워드한테 사실 이 질문은 꼭 드리고 싶은 질문이 있었어요. 뭐냐면 굉장히 많은 그 우리 한국 투자자들도 궁금해하실 것 같고요. 그러나 옥트리가 원래 미래를 전망하거나 그렇게 해서 투자하지 않는다라고 말씀하셨음에도 불구하고 여쭙고 싶은 게 지금 전 세계 금융시장이 이렇게 불안정한 데는 사실 페드의 역할이 굉장히 크다라는 것에 대해서 공감대가 있을 것 같아요. 근데 최근 들어서 페드가 이른바 피봇, 그러니까 금리를 계속 크게 올리다가 조만간 이제 금리를 올리지 않거나 내릴 수도 있다라는 그런 논의들이 미국 시장에 이제 조금씩 커져가고 있다라고 우리가 알고 있습니다. 그래서 하워드에게 제가 이 질문을 꼭 드리고 싶은데, 페드가 지금까지 미국 혹은 글로벌 경제를 이 인플레이션으로부터 구출하기 위해서 적절하게 행동했는지, 혹은 앞으로 만약에 피봇이 있다면 하워드 생각은 언제쯤 피봇이 있을 것 같은지에 대해서 이건 그냥 캐주얼하게 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
The first thing I want to say is that if you offered me that job, I wouldn't take it. It's very challenging. Since I don't believe in economic forecasts, I would not know how to do that job. And in the last memo, which I believe you read, I talk about the fact that even the Fed can't predict what it's going to do. And this shows the challenge that's involved. Second, I believe that the Fed and all the world central banks had the challenge in 2020 of confronting something it had never seen before, which was the pandemic. And in a crisis, in trying to figure out what lies ahead, I read a quote from a Harvard epidemiologist named Michael Lipsitch. He said, we have facts, analogies to prior experience, and supposition, which means guesses. But in the pandemic, we had no facts, We had no prior experiences to generalize from. All we had was guesses. That was true for the doctors trying to respond to the pandemic. It was also true for the central bankers trying to respond to the economic difficulty. This is the first time in history that the economy was shut down to prevent the spread of a disease. First time. How do you figure out how to do that and how to recover from it? So the vaccine was developed, and I use the analogy that sometimes when a man is very sick, a person, they put him into a coma so that they can develop a cure and fix it. And then, of course, you have to bring the person back to life. They put the economy into a coma. They had to, A, keep it alive, and B, bring it back to life. How do you do that if you've never been through it before? So the Fed took very strong actions. March 23rd of 2020, I believe it was, they announced the stepping up their program. And by the way, the markets went straight up from
2020.
2020 from March 23rd, straight up.
Yeah.
Now, you have three choices, let's assume. You can do it exactly right, too much, or too little. Which should you do? They don't know how to do it exactly right since there's no precedent. Okay, take that one off the table.
That means too much.
Too much or too little?
Too much.
Too much. And they did too much. And in America, for example, I happen to know the statistics, in the third round of relief, they sent a check to everybody who made less than $175,000 a year, which I think is 80% of the population. Now, something like, I estimate that something between 10 and 20% of the population was hurt financially by the pandemic. So 10 to 20 were hurt, 80% got checks. 60 to 70% of the population got checks for nothing. And they couldn't spend the money because the economy was shut down. You couldn't go on a vacation, you couldn't have a wedding, you couldn't have a party, you didn't need a dress for a party. So people got rich. The money piled up in the bank. At the same time that manufacturing was shut down. So they did arguably too much, but they did not want to do too little and let the economy slide into a depression. I believe that if the central banks had not taken action, there would have been a global depression. And a global depression is not just a recession that's a little worse. It's horrible. My father and mother lived through the depression, and believe me, they told me about it. And you had grown men standing on street corners selling apples because they couldn't get a job. So the central banks did too much, especially the Fed, and it laid the groundwork for inflation. What is inflation? Too much money chasing too few goods. So people had too much money, they were enriched by the relief, too few goods, the manufacturing was shut down, and when it started up again, it was a little unsteady. So we got inflation. Now, the big mistake was that the Fed concluded that it was likely to be transitory, temporary. I'm not smart enough to know whether that was well-reasoned or not. It was merely wrong. And as a consequence, they didn't start to reduce the stimulus early enough, and now we've had inflation now for a year and a half at a serious level. So now they're trying to withdraw stimulus, reducing interest rates, and rather than buying bonds, which puts money into the economy, they're selling bonds, which takes money out of the economy. And so you have to, before you criticize, you have to understand the difficulty. And anytime I think I know better than them, I say to myself, would you like that job? And that's why I said no. So they are now going to stay what we call hawkish. Easy money is called dovish. Tight money is called hawkish. They're going to stay hawkish for a good period of time. I would estimate at least till next summer. Number one, they want to stop inflation. And, you know, when we go camping, what do they tell you? If you have a campfire, it's not enough to put out the flames. You have to make sure that the embers are cold so that they won't start up again when you leave, right? They have to make sure all the fire is out. Number two, they have to slay the dragon of inflation. They have to kill inflationary thinking. Inflationary thinking is very dangerous because if I believe that there's going to be inflation ahead, I say, well, prices are going to go up in the future. I better buy now. What does that have? What does that do? It causes prices to go up. So inflationary expectations are self-fulfilling. They have to stamp those out and kill them. Kill them. And then number three, they have to preserve their own credibility by not do easy, hawkish, dovish, hawkish, dovish, hawkish, dovish. They have to appear to be presenting a consistent framework. So I think that they're going to stay hawkish for a good period of time, and that is likely to bring on a recession. Most people believe that the recession will be relatively brief and relatively mild. And what I say about that is we'll see.
굉장히 임프레시브한 게 코로나 팬데믹 상황을 맞아서 전 세계가 처음 당하는 일이었고 그거를 중앙은행이 이른바 코마 상태로 두었다. 그러면 이제 코마 상태에서 오퍼레이션 해야 되잖아요. 수술해야 되는데 그 수술의 그 인플레이션의 이란 치명적인 병증에 대한 수술이 그렇게 쉬워 보이지 않는다라는 말씀이신 것 같고
굉장히 의문적인 표현이죠.
그리고 그 결과물로 그 오퍼레이션으로의 결과물로 나오는 리세션도 우리가 생각하는 것처럼 마일드하거나 쇼텀 피리어드가 안 될 가능성이 있다 이렇게 말씀하신 거란 말이에요.
그걸 넌지시 시사했죠.
하여튼 굉장히 제가 걱정했던 그 대답을 해주셨는데 어쨌든 그 해석은 저희 몫으로 남겨두고요. 마지막으로 이 질문을 꼭 드려보고 싶습니다. 한국의 오크트리도 한국의 포트폴리오가 있죠?
We don't have a Korean portfolio, but we include Korea in many of our activities. We have
Right.
we invest in emerging market equities, and that Korea is eligible for inclusion there. And we have owned the debt of Korean companies from time to time in the past, and we make real estate investments in Korea.
오케이. 한국은 사실 굉장히 유례가 없는 발전을 한 산업 국가입니다. 그리고 어쩌면 이른바 우리가 얘기하고 있는 중진국의 함정을 스킵했거나 아니면 굉장히 빨리 돌파한 나라로 기록되기에 충분한 퍼포먼스를 냈다고 생각하는데 최근 들어서 굉장히 한국 경제에 대한 그 부정적인 여론들이 굉장히 많아요. 한국에 오셨으니까 더 한국에 대한 생각을 많이 하셨을 거라고 생각해서 마지막 질문으로 한국 경제에 대한 하워드의 생각을 좀 들어보고 또 그 생각 하에서 한국 투자자들에게 주시고 싶은 조언이 있다면 부탁을 좀 드려보겠습니다.
I've been coming to Korea for up to 15 years. I enjoy my visits. I have friends here that I like to spend time with. I have a high opinion of Korea. I think it's a very industrious country, well organized. I think it has a good balance of prudence and, shall we say, aggressiveness, and good energy, high aspirations for the future. I stress the fact that I don't know enough about Korea to have an opinion on its markets. I think it has a bright future. I don't know how its securities are priced commensurate with that future. I certainly am happy if Korean securities are included in our portfolios, but I keep my hands off.
Okay. All right. It was a great honor to have you here, our studio, and I was so happy to share this privilege to our audience. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, it's great to be here.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to the next time that I can see you, Jacob, and you, Nam.
Okay.
In New York.
In New York.
In New York, on Wall Street.
All right. Thank you very
Very
much,
good.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard, thank you.
자, 이렇게 하워드 막스 회장과의 인터뷰를 마치도록 하겠습니다. 사실 제한된 일정 때문에 사실 저의 마음속에는 한 10가지 이상의 질문이 있었는데
반나절을 좀 붙들고 붙잡고
그래서 그 질문을 제가 뉴욕에 가서 다시 기회를 가져보도록 하겠습니다. 이렇게 어려운 걸음 해주신 하워드 막스 회장께 다시 한번 감사드리고요. 그의 굉장히 인사이트풀한 그런 인터뷰를 우리 투자자 여러분들도 투자의 실전에 잘 사용해 주셨으면 저희의 보람이 될 것 같습니다. 그럼 저희는 다음번 글로벌머니 톡 시간에 다시 인사드려요. 그때 2%가 나올 것 같네요. 어쨌든 여러분 감사합니다. 고맙습니다.
감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed your interview.
That's very exciting.
Yeah. Because just imagine we can meet Wall Street or
No.
wherever in the state. The same topic is more convenient for
Yeah.
your side.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me know if I can help.
Please.